This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Monday, November 2nd. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. It is less than 24 hours before Election Day, and America stands at a crossroads, choosing between two presidential candidates with radically opposite visions of what America should be. But will we know who won the election on election night?
President Donald Trump and Joe Biden will be giving their closing arguments today as the long race to the White House approaches the finish line.
It's time for Donald Trump to pack his bags and go home.
Trump and Biden spent the last weekend before Election Day in key battleground states.
We are going to win the state of Michigan again.
Trump is hitting 5 states today, on top of large rallies across 5 states Sunday, many of them states he won in 2016.
And we're going to win 4 more years in the White House.
With reported COVID cases rising in most states, Joe Biden is slamming Trump's handling of the pandemic.
Imagine where we'd be if this president just wore a mask instead of mocked it from the beginning.
It's a choice between a deadly Biden lockdown. He wants to lock down. We're never locking down.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Elections Project shows more than 94 million Americans have already cast their ballots, surpassing 2/3 of all ballots cast during the 2016 presidential election. Folks like these Virginia voters waiting hours in line to make sure their vote is counted.
There's so much on the line.
What's on the line for you?
Our freedom.
But the huge number of mail-in ballots threatens to prolong the counting and delay declaring a winner.
We should know the result of the election on November 3rd. That's the way it's been.
Biden campaign senior advisor Anita Dunn thinks we'll know the results from some key states.
Georgia, North Carolina, and Florida are all states that I think we can reasonably assume we're going to hear results from either election night or early the next morning.
Trump campaign senior advisor Jason Miller told ABC's This Week he believes election night will show a Trump victory. It's after Election Day that he's worried about.
You speak with many smart Democrats. They believe that President Trump will be ahead on election night, probably getting 280 electorals, somewhere in that range. And then they're going to try to steal it back after the election.
Meanwhile, many shops and offices in major cities have already been boarded up amid fears of left-wing rioting after the election. This feels in some ways like a repeat of 2016, with Trump down in many polls, but also a sense that his support has again been underestimated by the pollsters. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And be sure to continue watching CBN News for all election results. From the recent historical Middle East peace deals to the Abraham Accords to the U.S. Embassy's move to Jerusalem, U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman has seen historic changes over the past 4 years. Friedman sat down for an exclusive interview with CBN News about what could be on the horizon.
Just days after the first commercial flight from the United Arab Emirates to Israel, Ambassador Friedman addressed the future of the Abraham Accords.
It seems to be coming to a crescendo. President Trump has said maybe 10 nations are in line. What's next and who's next?
Well, you know, you can pull out a map and come up with some pretty good guesses as to who's next. I think all the regional players are in discussion. I don't want to speak for them or betray any confidences or their sensitivities, but the president is correct. There are 5 to 10 countries that are in active discussions with us. They have everything to gain by joining this circle of peace. They have nothing to lose.
Looking at the impact of the Abraham Accords on the region, what do you see in a year, 2, 5 years? What could change here in the region?
Look, I think we are at the beginning of the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict. You know, you have so many people that are already on board. It just, you know, the narrative, the old grievances kind of collapses on itself. And I think we're really at the beginning of a very hopeful period in the Middle East.
As an observant Jew, Ambassador Friedman often looks at the Middle East through the lens of the Bible.
The original Abraham Accords was the reconciliation between Isaac and Ishmael. You know, Isaac was the second son of Abraham. Ishmael was the first. They were rivals. And Isaac and Ishmael reconciled before Abraham passed away. And we're doing that again 3,500 years later. And I think that that's an appropriate Bible story, Bible lesson for today.
Former Vice President Biden and Senator Harris have said that if they're elected, they would renew the Iranian nuclear deal. What impact could that have on Israel and the region?
It will be a complete disaster. Iran is a very dangerous country. We have made Iran far less dangerous than they were 4 years ago, and they're pulling back. They will continue to pull back, I believe, if we keep the sanctions on. The worst thing we can do right now, when we have them on the ropes, is to let the pressure off.
When you look back on the last 4 years, what achievements do stand out to you?
You know, I think that moving the embassy to Jerusalem, right here, this is my office in our Jerusalem embassy, I think that was really the most important thing the president did, not just because we all believe that Jerusalem's the capital of Israel. It's the message that the move sent to the world, that President Trump stands with his friends, stands on principle, keeps a promise, and it resonated throughout the world. And I believe that it set our foreign policy on the right track everywhere. It may seem counterintuitive to people, but we believe this would lead to peace, and it did.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem.
The peace agreement between the former Soviet countries of Armenia and Azerbaijan is not holding. They are still fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which both sides claim is their own. Armenian leaders are asking Russia for help, providing security assistance. Chuck Holton brings us this firsthand look at the personal toll this fight is taking.
If you want to know what a war crime looks like, this is it. This is an Azeri missile that landed on this hospital just today. This wing of the hospital was just about ready to open, and it's not near any military targets, so it's not like it was an accident. It is very clear the military of Azerbaijan is targeting civilian infrastructure.
Both sides accuse the other of atrocities in this conflict, but only Azerbaijan is trying to take land it doesn't control. The Armenians, on the other hand, see this as an existential threat.
They want occupied our territory and clean this territory from Armenians.
More than 99% of the people that live in this region are ethnic Armenians, and they make up one of the oldest Christian communities in the world.
We are here. That's our historical land. We want to live here, and we want to have our rights. We want to know our history. We want to have open churches. We want to pray.
I'm in the capital of the Nagorno-Karabakh region of Armenia called Artsakh, or this is the city of Stepanakert. Behind me you can see the effects of the Azeri bombardment that has been hitting this city since September 27th. Of the 150,000 people who live in this area, most of them have already had to flee, but there are still tens of thousands of people that are staying here, sleeping in their cellars, in their basements, and listening to the daily barrage of random artillery that's falling on this city.
On September 27, when we woke up, we heard the loud sounds of explosions. We saw the bursts, the smoke. We understood what's going on. And my dad told us to take all of our things and to go to his shops underground cellar.
Meanwhile, President Erdogan of Turkey has sent military assets to help Azerbaijan as this conflict has become a power struggle between regional superpowers. Armenia has limited support from Russia, but the Armenian military is still outnumbered 5-1.
It's just after noon, and the air raid siren is going off in the distance. There have been just random artillery shells falling sort of all around this hotel. One just landed about a quarter mile that direction, and another one just a minute ago landed right over this way. But this is what the people of Stepanakert are having to deal with literally every day without warning. So you could be walking down the street, and if one of those shells lands anywhere near you, it's game over.
And as the violence continues to intensify, Armenians are vowing to fight to the bitter end and are putting their faith in God. From the Republic of Artsakh, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Coming up, a look at one of the biggest threats facing our nation and why one expert says listening could be a practical first step to solving it.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
A new government report suggests white supremacists could be the most lethal threat to our national security. Our Heather Sells takes a look now at what we can do to fix it.
Elizabeth Newman began her domestic security career in the Bush administration in 2003. Most recently, she served as Assistant Secretary for Counterterrorism in the Homeland Security Department. During that time, she witnessed the rise of a domestic threat, the likes of which she had never seen. It started in 2017 with hate crimes against Jewish cemeteries.
A turning point for Newman came in August 2017, an outpouring of extremists in Charlottesville, Virginia, with a boldness that caught her and many people off guard.
You had people blatantly out in public. They weren't covering their face. They're carrying tiki torches as if they're going to a fraternity party, and they're saying, "You will not replace us."
That phrase is part of what's known as replacement theory, a fear stoked by these groups that whites will be replaced by other races. But their end goal is perhaps the biggest threat.
The root of their ideology is this belief that the only way to truly preserve the white race is to overthrow the U.S. government and establish a white nation.
The latest case in point, extremists who plan to storm the Michigan Capitol building and kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. In a new threat assessment report, Homeland Security Acting Secretary Chad Wolf cites specific concern about white supremacists. In the last 2 years alone, they have organized the majority of attacks by violent extremists, killing 39 people. And these groups, like the Boogaloo Boys, Adam Waffen Division, and the Rise Above movement, are not amateurs.
These are people that are increasingly sophisticated and educate themselves on what law enforcement can and can't do, what the First Amendment allows for. And they walk right up to that line of incitement to violence, and they're careful not to cross it.
Another concern, the pandemic. It's increased the number of vulnerable people who are susceptible to being recruited.
The vulnerabilities tend to be for people who have had a number of stress factors in their life. And right now, we all have stress factors in our life. Increased social isolation. We're all dealing with increased social isolation because of the pandemic. Loss of a job, loss of a family member, financial stress.
Extremists work to convince those suffering that these legitimate grievances can threaten their very existence and that violence is necessary to defeat it. Newman says they are also intentional about using statements from the president to build support. This observation became clear during her time at DHS. One big moment came after the El Paso massacre, when investigators found the president's language about immigrant invasions in the shooter's manifesto. White supremacists have also benefited from his refusal at times to denounce them.
I understand the argument that he has condemned. Why are you making him condemn again? It's because of the way that these people think. They view the dancing around the issues and the unwillingness to condemn hate when it first shows up as, actually, like, I'm really with you guys. And that emboldens people.
Looking forward, Newman warns that white supremacists and other extremists may target events around the election. For those who want to promote peace, she encourages the simple act of listening to someone with a different viewpoint. That alone, she says, could help bring our country back to the practice of civil dialogue. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Government leaders deployed National Guard troops in Philadelphia this weekend following unrest in response to the police killing of a 27-year-old black man, Walter Wallace. Officers arrested more than 200 people and more than 50 officers have been hospitalized in connection to the unrest following that killing. FaithWire's Dan Andros joins us now to discuss how a church was caught in the crossfire. Dan, tell us what happened.
Yeah, well, Pastor Philip Pham of Vietnam Baptist Church in Philadelphia says he has no idea why they were targeted, but in the midst of all of these protests, their church was set on fire, and the building is a total loss, according to Pastor Pham. He said they burned it from the roof, they threw flammable chemicals on the roof, and flames just burned right on through it. And as I said, the building is now an absolute total loss. He's at a loss as to why in the world they were targeted in the first place. But in the midst of all this, the pastor does share that there was one answered prayer in the midst of all the mess. He said that his primary concern when he had learned that the building was on fire, obviously he was glad there was nobody in there. It was at night. But he said that there were 3 hard drives that contained over 15 years of immigration paperwork, tax filings, all these this personal information, as their church is heavily involved with helping people, obviously being Vietnamese church, with immigration paperwork. And so he was saying there was a lot of things that could be replaced. Stuff can be replaced, he's saying, but that paperwork where they're working diligently to help these people cannot be replaced. And so he said he prayed for these hard drives. And then when he got there, he saw the routers and the modems and the things surrounding the hard drives all burned, all melted. But he said that hard drive, the one that contained all that sensitive information that couldn't be replaced, he said no harm at all. And he said just 2 feet above that, all melted. That is amazing how God knows our needs and answers our prayers. He is Almighty God. He granted our prayers. So good words from the pastor there in the midst of this really unthinkable act.
And what are the plans now for the church? Are they planning to rebuild?
Yeah, they're going to try. But interestingly, Pastor Pham is really most concerned, it seems like, with spiritual needs rather than the physical needs. He said he's asking for prayer because his congregants really need encouragement. He specifically pointed to some of the newer believers there. He said, obviously they've got some seasoned believers who are more able to and equipped to get through a circumstance like this, but specifically asked for those new believers that they would, have the endurance and the faith to get through this. He also encouraged youth pastors to reach out to young people in the area, asking them to profess the words in James 1:20, which says, "Human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires." Here's his quote. He said, "You can't use your anger and be justified." I would like to bring this message to all young people. So that's his focus today.
Thank you so much, Dan. I want to remind you at home, you can watch FaithWire right here on the CBN News Channel tonight at 9:30 Eastern. Still ahead, fighting sugar addiction, we're going to show you how one woman overcame her toxic eating habits and the tips she has now for others to do the same.
Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family. And collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app. A great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
Watch On the Home Front today at 2:30.
Too often, we carry baggage from our past. You know what it's like. It affects everything and everyone in our lives. It's always there, weighing us down and keeping us from achieving true happiness. But do you know God never meant for us to be trapped in the past? You can be free of your baggage. Learn how God's forgiveness leads to changed lives and new beginnings. Call the 700 Club.
Molly Carmel once weighed 325 pounds. Then she decided to end what she called an abusive relationship with one of the foods she was eating. So what was that food, and why is this one ingredient blamed for an epidemic killer that is sweeping across the country? Our health reporter, Lori Johnson, has the story.
Like millions of Americans, Molly Carmel spent years trying different diets without ever seeing true success. At one point, she tipped the scale at 325 pounds.
I had to get into the shower sideways. You know, I stopped wearing underwear completely because back in those days, I didn't know where to buy underwear that would fit me. Like I stopped wearing shoes that tied because I couldn't tie my shoes, and it was as dark, and I couldn't stop eating.
In an act of desperation, Molly underwent bariatric surgery, but even that didn't stick.
The only thing worse than being morbidly obese is gaining weight back after being morbidly obese.
Life completely changed for Molly as she read studies on mice addicted to sugar. She learned consuming the sugar releases dopamine into the brain and how that feel-good chemical triggers memory, desire, and behavior. The research really clicked when Molly saw how giving into cravings meant it would take even more sugar to achieve the same level of pleasure.
Reading research that really it described me. I was like, oh.
Knowing processed flour affects the body just like sugar, Molly determined many of her diets failed because they allowed some flour and sugar consumption.
You know, they are big into moderation, which I think is I think it's impossible for so many of us. Let me tell you something. If I could moderate, that's what I would do.
For the first time in her life, she decided to give up sugar and flour for 3 days.
And when I started to have the detox, I was like, uh-oh.
But she pushed through.
I decided to continue on for 3 more days.
Okay.
About day 57, I thought, I can do this.
She lost the weight and kept it off.
I mean, I haven't had sugar or flour in 10 years.
Now Molly helps others at her Manhattan weight loss clinic and in her book, Breaking Up with Sugar, in which she compares the addiction to a bad relationship.
I mean, think about an abuser. It's like, oh, you think you can get on without me, huh? You're a nothing. You're a nobody, right? And if you're an outside perspective, if you're watching that movie, You're like, get out of there, girl. You're fine. You're amazing.
Ditching sugar and flour involves the big ticket items like cake and cookies, but also lots of processed foods you might not expect.
Sugar is a tricky, tricky, tricky little abuser because it really is everywhere. I gave up ketchup. I gave up teriyaki sauce. I gave up a lot of salad dressings. I had to start to read ingredients.
If sugar, or one of its many aliases, is in one of the first 4 ingredients, just say no. Molly says after a while, it becomes easier.
I travel and I go out to dinner and I order in and I live a big, abundant life.
The hardest part is enduring the headaches, depression, and other withdrawal effects that can last for days or weeks.
It's a real thing, and it passes. You want to know the way it passes, though? So if we don't go back to the sugar.
So while not everyone feels controlled by sugar, Molly Carmel believes many do.
I think there's a part of our country that is so deeply giving up on themselves and is so deeply hopeless.
And says if she can kick the habit, anyone can. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Right back. Are you suffering from feeling tired or worn out during the day? Can you not turn off your brain at night? You are not alone. Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Bruce, the sleep doctor, and I've partnered with the Christian Broadcasting Network, and we're going to bring you some unbelievable information that you can use tonight to get a better night's rest.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free copy of Protect Your Sleep today.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Woohoo! Hi, Superbook fans. Here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh, no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man coming.
Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes, too. And so much more! Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon! It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
I'd like to leave you with a little motivation for your Monday. Know this: if you spend too much time looking at the meal on someone else's plate, the food on your plate is getting cold. Mind your own gifts and talents. Use them to do what God has called you to do. There is only one you, and the talents God has given you can only be activated by you. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. I want to thank you so much for watching, and want to remind you, you can always watch us on the CBN News Channel. Bye-bye.